Come one, come all, and see our informative and educational puppet show. Here we're going to explain the history, diagnostics, symptoms, and treatments of multiple sclerosis, also known as MS. We're going to give you the basic knowledge of the disease with the help from the National Multiple Sclerosis Society and a special guest. With all of this information, we hope you're able to learn from it and to help bring awareness about the disease. We hope you enjoy the presentation.
What is MS? MS is a chronic autoimmune disorder that attacks the myelin sheath membrane that covers our nerves. It affects the central nervous system and it disrupts the informational flow from the brain to the rest of the body. There unfortunately is no cure. The cause of getting the disease is through genetics, and there is no known cause at the time that creates it to come out. Women are more likely to have MS than men are.
In 1433, there was a Dutch saint known as Ludwina who was possibly the first known patient to have MS, but at the time there was hardly any knowledge on the disease and what caused it. It took a very long time for MS to be discovered from whenever it was first seen in 1433. Jean-Martin Charret was the first person to recognize MS in 1868. He was able to see what MS did, which was the hardened scar tissue around the nerve fibers. Our immune system begins to attack our nerve cells called an axon, therefore causing damage to the myelin sheath that's around the nerve fibers. This causes problems with the communication to the rest of the body.
When Charcot first discovered MS and saw the scar tissue, it took a long time before more information on MS was found. Technology advanced more in the 1900s, and that's when the scientists were able to learn more about MS. In 1916, a Scottish doctor named James Dawson was able to clearly describe the inflammation and demyelinization after viewing brain cells of patients with MS through a microscope. This was a very important discovery at the time because it described the process of how MS affected the body and started out. With technology advancing faster, information on MS was gathered and there was able to be more found out at the time.
Recent discoveries. As technology continued to advance and get better, there have been more and more recent discoveries and help us understanding MS. In the 1960s, researchers discovered that MS is an autoimmune disease, one in which the body thinks it's being invaded, so it attacks itself. Finding this out helped doctors work on better treatments for MS. Then MRIs and CAT scans were developed more in the 70s, letting scientists look at brains and learn more about MS. This also allowed for better treatments to be discovered and worked on. As researchers went on, there were treatments tested. These trials led to the availability in the early 1990s of the first long-term drug treatments to affect the course of MS. This was a huge step in the direction of helping people with MS and giving them treatments.
What are some of the symptoms? The most common is fatigue, which contains chronic tiredness, headache, dizziness, muscle aches, and weakness, also moodiness. This immerses with basic ability to function. There is also walking difficulties. This is due to weakness and balance loss. This can be helped with a physical therapist. There will be numbness. It all varies throughout the body. Spasticities, which is stiffness and muscle spasms. Vision complications is usually the first symptom for most people. It creates eye pain within the movements of looking around.
Further along with MS, there can be bladder dysfunction and bowel complications. Brain functions are affected and the ability to process information, learn, remember, and focus can be affected. Emotional changes and depression are also pretty common with patients. We're going to take a short break and cut to Kevin, who's in the real world, with our special guest to talk about his condition and give us more insight into MS.
I am with Dan Hudson, 40 years old. He is video interviewing for a clinical case study of multiple sclerosis for Anatomy 101. Question 1. When were you diagnosed?
About 6 or 7 years ago. You want to know how it happened? I used to do stand-up comedy, and one of the things I used to do was a joke on this, but it's a joke, but it's true. I woke up one morning with the worst headache I've ever had. It felt like I got hit in the head with a 2x4, and then the next day, but you know how it is. You got bills to pay, so you got to go to work, and went to work. Next day, woke up, and it felt like my eyes were crossing, and still had those bills, went to work, woke up the next day and I was blind at the time. So they had to put me on a straight steroid drip and all that good jazz. But that's how I figured out something was wrong and went to an eye doctor. Of all people, the eye doctor was the one that caught it. He's like, because they kept I guess MS is one of the most misdiagnosed diseases, and they kept saying I had Meniere's disease, and the only part they had right was the M at the beginning and the S at the end. So, but that's what ended up happening was he caught it because he was doing an eye test on me, and I might be using the wrong term, but it was called nope. When my eyes, like, it was weird. It felt like one of my eyes was going up as the other one went to the right, and it was just, I thought I was dying. And the doctor's like, you got MS, and he still makes fun of me to the day because of the way I reacted. I'm like, cool. And he's like, you're the only person to ever say that, and I'm like, I thought I was dying. So.
What are some of the symptoms you've experienced with it?
Goodness. Let's see. I've had, like I said, the eye problem. I'll hear ringing in the ear, which is messed up. And I mean, it's almost like painful. Another way I found out I had it was I was suffering from vertigo attacks where like I'm looking right at you and then all of a sudden you just turn upside down. The weird thing is like leg spasms. I'll be sitting there and my leg will just start like twitching like that. And heat, if I go out, I can't be out in the heat for more than like I don't remember how long. And that I get real nauseous and tired. And the one weird thing I did have, and I don't know anybody else that's had this, is I could withstand like extreme cold. It was weird because like I could go outside in the winter in a pair of shorts and I would never get cold. But I had to start looking and making sure I wasn't like getting frostbite or anything like that, and that seems to have gone away now. But it's about everything you can imagine. It's fun.
What are some of the treatments that you've been given?
Oh goodness, I was on beta-seron, which is a shot, which was, I can't remember how many times a week, 5 days a week. Then I got switched to, that's where I went to the neurologist. It was a mistake. They put me on a new drug called Tecfidera, which is actually pill form, and it worked for a while, and then it started going a little loopy. Then I got switched over to Copaxone, which is 20 milligrams, very light. And right now I get once a month, or once every 6 month infusions. I have to actually go up to Cincinnati, and I look like a drug addict because I have like marks all over my wrist, or not my wrist, but my elbows. And that's why, because they have to hook me up, and it takes about 3 hours to do. But it's not too exciting.
Diagnosis. There's not a real test to see if someone has MS. Doctors have to rule out all other factors, and they have to see 2 times where the disease has activity in the central nervous system. As said before, there is no cure for MS, but there are certain medications that can try to help delay the progression of the disease from getting worse, although the disease will still get worse over time. There are 4 different types of MS: clinically isolated syndrome, relapsing remitting MS, primary progressive MS, and secondary progressive MS.
Clinically isolated syndrome, CIS, is the first episode of neurologic symptoms that last at least 24 hours. There are 2 types of episodes that can occur. A monofocal episode is when there is a singular neurologic sign or symptom, like an attack of an optic neuritis that's caused by a single lesion. A multifocal episode is when the person experiences more than one sign or symptom, like an attack of optic neuritis, accompanied by numbness or tingling in the legs, which is caused by lesions in more than one place. For it to be determined that a person has CIS to MS, a doctor has to see damage within the central nervous system. MRI findings of lesions in the brain have to be similar to a patient with MS. If the lesions are similar, then there is likelihood of developing the disease is higher. Relapsing, remitting, MS are attacks of new or increasing neurologic symptoms. The attacks are followed by partial or complete recovery or remission.
During these remissions, all symptoms may disappear or continue and become permanent. However, in remission, there's no apparent progression of the disease in this period. Primary progression MS is when a neurologic function becomes worse without remission. About 15% of people with MS are diagnosed with PPMS. Secondary progressive MS. At first, it's relapsing, remitting, and most people with relapsing, remitting MS get SPMS. This is when there's a continuous worsening of neurological function. That's it.
With all of this info we have talked about, we hope to have increased your awareness of this disease. A huge thank you to our special guest Dan for helping us have a look into his life and how he lives with MS.